My name is Barry Perrins. For as long as I've been alive, I've had connections with the sea. These days I have a sailing channel on YouTube called Adventures of an Old Seadog. My boat White Shadow and I have seen it all, from the bad to the good. The plan is to sail as much of the world as I possibly can. And then I met this man. This is Martin Tasker. Turns out Martin is a retired international journalist. In his early days, he actually worked in Plymouth before moving to New Zealand, where he became New Zealand's go-to man for coverage of international sailing events like the America's Cup. So this is the story of what happened when the Old Seadog met up with international yachting correspondent Martin Tasker.
Barry Perrins, Old Seadog, tell me, you reckon that arriving here was the highlight of the trip so far? Why?
Because it was part of a dream come true. The whole dream is really to do a certain circumnavigation. But I'm taking it one little bit at a time. That's the way to do things like this, I reckon. Not to make the goal too big that you can't fulfill it. So it's bit by bit by bit. And on the last section, it was getting to New Zealand, which was basically the halfway around the world. Plymouth is my hometown back in the UK, and that's pretty much exactly opposite where we are today, which is a half circumnavigation. So it was a big goal.
Now we're in sight here of Whangarei Heads that you came round and you saw that. What was that feeling like? And I know it was pretty emotional for you.
Yeah, I mean, I came in a little bit north of Opua, and the sailing was really good. Then I ran out of daylight. So I was concerned because I'm somewhere where I'd never been before, and there are rocks and there are little islands and the islands that you have when you come into this part of the world, and I was running out of daylight, so I had to spend another night out. So my thoughts were really, where do I need to position the boat somewhere where I can sleep safely, and the wind died down, so I kind of just free floated around, bobbed around for the night. So it wasn't until I'd sort of made sure the boat was safe for the night that it kind of sank in that I'd actually arrived, and I got excited. Yeah.
Now that's seeing a landfall, and you've seen a lot of them now. When you see land and you've been at sea for a long time, what's the feeling?
Relief one, and fear another. It's both at the same time, because you've made your destination. The plan has come together, but it is very scary because you don't know what's there. You arrive and you don't know exactly where you should be. You're looking through the binoculars, and then you've got to deal with the bureaucrats or the officials when you get. So it's quite scary as well as a happy time. It's a mixture.
It can't be as scary as the first time you set off on your own, especially when you set off on your own, not planning to head back that day, but actually that day when you left. Describe what it was like when you sailed for the first time out of sight of land on your own.
On a previous boat I'd deliberately gone out by myself to see what it was like, because that was the thing, to do it by myself. It wasn't as scary as I thought it would be, to be honest with you. Everybody says, oh, you look, but when I looked 360 degrees around and there was no land, it excited me rather than scared me. I didn't want to be scared. I thought, don't be scared about it. But yeah, it was another little tick in the boxes.
That's really cool, because I mean, it can be quite unnerving when you realise that that's your world now, is just this little bit of boat floating in the ocean. And then, did you ever? I mean, you sometimes spent like 70 odd days across the Pacific on your own. How long would you go without seeing any other sign of life? And did that get you a bit paranoid, or how did it work?
I think I've said this somewhere else before. I've been a bit of a loner all my life. I don't have my own family, never got married or anything. I don't know the reasons why, and that's not important. But I'm used to spending time alone. So it wasn't. I like company. I love being with people, but it's not a big deal for me to be alone. It doesn't affect me. I'm quite I can get on. I can make my world small, and I'm doing the filming project as well. So there's always a day when I get up in the morning, or up and down, obviously, because I'm sailing the boat. But the day has things that I have to do: run the boat, film stuff, read, and what have you. But it's not a problem to be alone for me.
Did you ever wonder, maybe, when you've been at sea for a long time and on your own and no other sign of life around, that maybe you're the last man standing? Maybe it's all ended.
There was a wonderful film years ago, and I can't remember, and it's about New Zealand, where there's a submarine in the northern hemisphere and everybody been blitzed and the world had ended, and New Zealand was the only place left in the world, and that's because we were right down here. So that did come to my mind when I was sailing down here. 'Tis the end of the world, literally, because I don't have any communication with the shore. Yeah,
that's a pretty weird feeling, I would imagine.
Yes, it is a weird feeling. I don't know what's going on out there. When I was coming across the Pacific, and there was no contact with the outside world, and I was worried about people worrying about me because I was overdue. And I was 71 days at sea. That was, I wasn't. I was fine with myself, but I was worried for other people, and not knowing what's going on in the outside world. Yeah.
And that's when they put up the Learjet that came out and found you. And
yeah, my friend Dave, he's the coxswain of the Plymouth lifeboat, because I used to work on the lifeboats back at home, and he's my eyes on shore, and he's the man. And he made the call, because on the long passages, it's nice to have someone like him in particular, who's I call it eyes on shore, who's there looking out for me. And if I'm overdue, and I put a sail plan in, I try and work out what sort of speeds I'm going to be doing and when I should be arriving somewhere. So I know that if something goes wrong, there is someone responsible out there who's going to make that call, and that's what happened. And I was actually wishing he didn't make that call, because I knew what would happen. I was fine, and of course the emergency services were activated. People started looking for me, and the French sent a Learjet out. And I remember when it flew over me, having a great sense of relief. I did weep a little bit, and I was happy that my friends back home my family would know that I was safe. But at the same time, I'm thinking, I hope I don't have to pay the fuel bill for that. Really. Oh wow, that was the French Air Sea Rescue. Well, my folks back home are going to be so happy that I'm still around, you know. I was so worried for them. They must have put the call through.
You talk about tear in the eye and what have you. That's very frank, and that's been you know, warts and all, when you've been doing all this blogs. A conscious decision?
Yeah.
You could have hidden it. You didn't have to show.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot more, which was very. It was just like, oh, man up, man. Yeah, there was a lot more of that. Like, oh yeah. So I did think about how much of that to use, and I pared it down because I thought it was important to put that in, and also sometimes you have to be. Well, that wasn't over the top. That was a natural thing, but sometimes you have to go a little bit over the top on video, because it's difficult to communicate an emotion to people. You have it in real life, but to communicate that on video is a hard thing to do, to make people feel the way you do, which is what it's all about. It's a real life thing, but it is a story. It's my story. So I decided to go with that, and in the end it was the right decision. And the amount of people that wrote to me saying that they thanked me for the honesty of the emotions, but the people that cried were all men. I had no ladies writing into me and saying, oh Barry, but it was all guys, you know, I was crying while I was watching your video. But anyway, yeah, no, it was a difficult decision, but I think the right one.
Well, talking of all the people watching, we're here because we watched it.
Yes.
And and we're engaged by it, like so many people have been engaged. What do you think? I mean, clearly that's part of it, but what's the recipe that's let your blog work, do you think, the way that it has worked, that you've got such a big following?
I don't have great teeth, and I don't have the best of looks, and I'm an old fella with a... I mean, this is the winter plumage, by the way. I think what it comes down to being that I have a niche. There's so many people out there who are pretty, beautiful people, are doing these wonder, and that's fine for them. But I have a little niche, and that niche is the older crowd. It's the silver surfers, as they used to call them back in the days of early internet. I had a YouTube channel for quite a few years. Some of it's still up there now. I was trying to do little comedy vignettes and failing miserably.
I don't know. I mean, I've seen one where you did your show reel with the questionable outfits.
Yes. But nobody watched them. It was the early days. YouTube was different in the early days. It wasn't a commercial thing. It was people just making videos to entertain each other, and even families keeping in touch by video. It was a different thing. And with that, I was doing comedy stuff, and I was trying to. And then I got older, and I looked ridiculous, and I stopped doing it. So I kind of learned how to edit, and I actually did work. I did a training course briefly to do edit, and I kind of left that aside. When I got the boat, things had changed. YouTube had changed. The equipment that we were talking before we started today about how everything miniaturized now, the equipment changed, so you could have high definition, and it needed money to buy things like MacBooks. You've got to run everything on a MacBook ready for, we're getting technical here, but basically it became easier to make this stuff, higher quality, more professional. Anybody can do it. You just need a little bit of training and imagination. So I started the project with a boat, and I thought, well, I'll film it because I've got the kit to do it with now. I know how to do it. I'll just film it and just put the stuff on hard drives and forget about it for the moment. So I didn't actually do anything, and for at least nearly a year, I think. And then I thought, yeah, we'll try and do something with this and then I came up with the Old Adventures of an Old Seadog.
So the thing is that it's real, and it's what is happening on a day-to-day basis, and you do a lot, and yet it sounds counterintuitive, really. But you say that you struggle to get going, and yet you do all these things, and you talk about days. I remember that one where you talk about a list crossing offness. You've got to have a day of list. We all have lists. I really like that. But
yeah.
What does make you get up and get on with it?
Well, you need to do things. The mast has to stay standing. This rope has to pull that way, and this doobry-joomy flippy what's it thing has to work, and so you've got to do things. The stuff that has to be done, and it's a safety thing. If you don't do this or that, then you might die. It's as black and white. That's motivating, and it's as black and white as that. It really is. So that's what gets me going. But I am a naturally lazy person, and I have to force myself.
Now you've also developed a kind of theme. I mean, your language. You were a Goons fan, were you, by any chance?
Yeah,
but a little bit. I mean, Heridius, lovely invention of a word, and your list crossing offness.
Yeah, well, the weather's always a Heridius thing. You know, it's horrendous and horrific or whatever. Two things. But yeah, I mean, morbestness is another one. You know, the opposite of Heridius. I forget what the question was.
Well, the question really is that. What you're doing and what people are looking at is, in a way, you know, you're learning how you've got to look after yourself, how you've got to look after the boat. And it seems that that's what people have really enjoyed watching. They enjoy watching you fix things and how things have got to work. And presumably that, you know, you're doing that deliberately because you've had the feedback that says people like to know.
Yeah, they like also when things go wrong, horridously wrong. They like that stuff as well. I seem to spend a lot of time working on the boat anyway. It's the nature of the beast. And so that has to be in the videos. It is an integral part of it. And also it's part of the keeping it real thing, which I think is important. And that is part of the channel, is that it's sailing, keeping it real. People have to realise it's not just all fun and games. There is a serious side, and there's an everyday stuff that you do which is monotonous. You know, you've got to clean, you've got to do this, like it's running a house as well as.
Has the feedback that you've had, has that influenced you, and if so, in what way?
Yes, when people get to know you, you have to take everything with a pinch of salt, because there's so many people out there with a different. That's the wrong way of putting it, but there's a lot of people out there with all different views on you, and it can be a bit confusing to listen to everybody and take to heart everything everybody says. So you try not to do that, and it's not being nasty. It's just I can't take notice of everything everybody says to me, but if a majority of people are saying this or that, then of course I listen. Because it's important. Without the people who are watching me and subscribing, I wouldn't have the channel that I have. I wouldn't have the success that I have.
Now, when you get to a port like you're here in Whangarei, and in a way you've been stuck here because of the pandemic. You know, you had no choice but to sort of stay put. You seem to get into the community, and you know you go and play your music and. Yeah. That must be one of the really great things to be able to do around the world.
Yes, it is. I mean, I'm lucky here in this part of New Zealand. There's a great community spirit, and I feel like I'm almost a Kiwi. I've got a Kiwi driving license and a Kiwi bank account, but they won't give me a passport, unfortunately.
If we talk about a dream coming true, and this is part of the dream. You're halfway around completing the dream. You've got to go from here back up to Blighty eventually, but. What made you think you could make this dream come true? And given that it has, what's your advice to the armchair people who are looking at this thinking, oh, I wish I could do that?
Well, the dream hasn't come true yet. Half of it has. There's still a lot more to do, and some scary parts. Indian Ocean, South Africa and so on. But if it all stopped today, then I'd be happy with what I've done. Yes, absolutely. So I have done a lot of what I wanted to do. But if people want to do it, you've got to get out there and do it, and don't put off. Don't say, oh, I'll do it in a few. I mean, I know people can't just go off. I mean, I understand that, and there's always the money and finance. But if you can, do it sooner rather than later, because life is not forever. We're not all here forever. You never know what's around the corner. If you want to do something, go out there and do it. It's very important that you do. It's better not to have the regrets, and it's better to have, you know, when you're in the old people's home, sitting there dreaming about things that you've done, or thinking about things you've done and the places you've been, the people you met, and not to have regrets. The first part of my life is full of regrets. I won't go down that road, but since I embarked on this venture, I have no regrets at all.
You were quite
Hey, just stop me, just wait for that.
I was just going to say, this helicopter, I've always had a theory that when you turn a camera on, it sends a signal up to a helicopter to come and hover over you.
Yeah.
I don't know how many interviews I've done with a helicopter.
Just be quiet for a minute.
Okay.
I just with the camera. We just stopped because there's a helicopter flew over. When I was working with the emergency services in England, we'd be on the radio on the lifeboat, and they'd be called a helicopter, and the guys would always come back. You couldn't understand a word they said. How long will you be?
I've lost my track there.
It was ending up not having regrets. You've done it.
No regrets, yes. And I was going to say that you've embarked on this really quite late in your life, and without delving too deep into it, you did a lot of different jobs, and until you embarked on this, you had a pretty varied existence.
Yeah, I was a salesman, I was a disc jockey, I was a diving instructor, I'd done all kinds of, I worked in factories. I never had it easy, and I didn't have an education as such. I was born abroad in Nigeria, and my father was working abroad, and he pulled us around the world, Malaysia, Sierra Leone, and I finished my education actually in the States. I was 2 years living in the United States in high school. But because I moved about a lot, I'd never got much of a good education, and so that meant that I wasn't ever going to have a good job, and I just ended up doing all kinds of stuff just to make money. So, but it was good life experiences, but it didn't make me a rich man.
So you moved down to Plymouth, now from up Yorkshire way.
Yeah.
You come down to Plymouth, and I mean, what a great place to be thinking of doing a seafaring.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's sort of a greater place in a way than being in Plymouth. What changed then, and what triggered this finally to you hit the go button? I'm going to do this.
I was living with my father in his house up in Yorkshire, and my best friend was away in some exotic place, and I was feeling lonely and tired and down, and I thought I need to change things. If I wanted to live anywhere in the country where I live, and I thought Plymouth, that sounds like a great place. Down the southwest, you know, weather's better. They got palm trees down there. So I literally jumped in the car and drove down there and got a job, found a little place to live, and just said right. And I ended up making that my home, and I call it my home now because it's where all my friends are, and I lived there for nearly 20 years before I came away on the boat. So yes, I just made that change. It was one of these things, and I believe this: if you get stuck in a rut, you need to kick down a new door and force your way through it. Because you have to make the change yourself, because sometimes it's not going to happen. Nobody's going to do it for you, and that was me. I was going nowhere fast, and I was getting older, and then I kicked that door down and I started a new life down the south. And of course, in that town, it's all boaty stuff.
Well, the Barbican, and you know, you go down there, and there's all those plaques of the people who set off the Mayflower Steps where they all went off. You became one of those. You are one of those adventurers. What was that final little thing that said, you know, you'd kicked down the door, you'd gone down to Plymouth, you'd got that working, and you suddenly thought, or not suddenly, you thought, I want to sail around the world. What tipped it?
The death of my parents, really. I mean, I still had no money. I was still doing odd jobs and this and that. And my parents died. I was lucky to have my father's house. Well, I wasn't lucky. I ended up at my father's house. And I shared everything with my sister, and I had my father's house, and I sold that and bought the boat. I thought, well, what do I do? Do I buy a house down in where I'm living in the south? And if I do, I'm still going to be poor because I'll have spent all the money on the house and I'll still have to work to pay the bills. Or do I buy a boat, which is what I did, you know. And I thought, well, and so a friend of mine said, you have the golden key. You've been given a golden key to do the dream that you want to do, and that's sail around the world on your own boat.
Well, but you gave up all that potential security of a nice little semi.
Yeah, security. I mean, we all know there's no such thing. That's a dream. You have to be as careful as you can, keep your health right, and keep out of dangerous places in the world. Take all these precautions, but at the end of the day, the fates will have you no matter what. So you have to take that risk to get out there in the unknown and get away from the comfort zone. I'm a firm believer in that. Now, that's a big problem with too many people in big old comfort zone televisions, big couches, and they don't do anything with their lives, and that's not right.
How would you persuade them that getting out there and doing it is the thing to do? It's
not just getting out there. It's doing something. If you want to paint. I had a conversation once with a woman who said, I want to be a writer, and I said to her, what have you written? She said, well, nothing yet. I'm like, well, never going to be a writer. And I write songs. I'm trying desperately to do some music. That's another thing. But I was listening to someone who was a famous songwriter. I forget who it was now. He said, you just keep writing. You write and you write and you write, and maybe one day you'll make something that everybody will like and they'll listen to, or read, or whatever it happens to be. And it's the same with getting out and doing it, no matter what it might be. Going down to the end of the road and summing a lift and setting off around the world on a bicycle or something. But you've got to be doing something. Just get out there and do it now.
There's a fear. There's a fear there. How did you manage to overcome that fear of what it's there, what you want to do, but I've got to give. That there's a barrier of fear
Yes.
that you've got to overcome.
It's a barrier fear. It's you fight it back. Fear is a good thing in that it keeps you safe, especially on a boat. Being overconfident and blasé about things will get you killed or hurt. Fear is good. It makes you look at things in a different way and carefully before you do them. But the type of fear you're talking about, yes, it is there. You fight it back and you get on with it. Casting off the dock lines is the hardest thing. Once you've set off, you're fine.
Freedom.
Stepping on board and casting off those lines is still a hard thing to do.
Then the trip home.
Indian Ocean, which is the Big E, around South Africa, and then what I want to do is go to the island of St Helena, which is in the south central Atlantic. Because my family come from there originally. I can trace my family back to the 1600s there. And then across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. And I believe they're partying there at the moment, so I want to get there. I'm missing that.
What books, you've obviously read a lot, what books kind of inspired you, or would you suggest that people might enjoy reading?
I was inspired by the Golden Globe race and back in the 60s, and Robin Knox Johnson. He's my hero. I mean, I'd love to meet the guy at some point. So books of around that era, I can't think off the top of my head the names of the books, but those people from the 60s, the people that did it first.
You've got your own story now. Is there a book at the end of this?
Well, people ask me that. I have been writing bits and pieces, but it's like my journey. I don't call it a book till it's a book. I've been writing little bits and I file them away on a hard drive, and when I have enough bits I might try and join them together.
That's when you retire, when you're back in an armchair.
Maybe one day.
And you'll be in that armchair and you'll have done it, and what a golden glow that's going to be giving you down the track.
I hope so. I mean, that's why I'm keen to carry on, because when you regale other these stories and you talk about what you've done, people don't really want to know, to be honest. When you get back, you say, I did this and that, and they're like, oh yeah, right. But it's for me rather than anybody else. It's for me. And sailing halfway around the world doesn't do it. It doesn't get the biscuit, you know. The prize is to do a circumnavigation. And you say, I sailed around the world single-handed. I mean, that's the one.
Oh, get me envious. Well, we'll just finish off. We'll just say, wish you fair winds, and thanks very much for lovely to talk to you.
Thank you, Martin, for coming down. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you very much. Cheers.